Well, good afternoon and welcome back to another live iThemes training event. My name is Nathan Ingram and I'm the host here at iThemes Training, and I'm joined today by Lindsay Halsey. Lindsay is the co-founder of Pathfinder SEO, where she teaches business owners and freelancers how to get found in Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Now, Lindsay is based in Basalt, Colorado, and after 10 years as a partner in an SEO agency, she noticed that the traditional approaches to SEO left many people behind. Either the cost of hiring an agency was prohibitive or the do-it-yourself solution was just too overwhelming. So Lindsay and the team at Pathfinder thought there must be a better way, and they developed what they call guided SEO. Now today, Lindsay's going to be talking to us about Search Engine Optimization 101, and there's a lot all of us, I think, can learn from this. So I'm looking forward to this one. Lindsay, welcome back to iThemes Training. We're glad you're with us today.
Thank you for the warm welcome.
Awesome. So, we did in the pre-show, we had folks kind of check in with a 1 to 10 scale of how they would self-rate their SEO skill. Most were in, 4 to 6, a few 2s and 3s, a couple 7s and 8s. But most were kind of right there in the middle. And we may have folks that are here who may be brand new to SEO. This will be great content for them. But what would you say to people who maybe have done some SEO training or they have a little bit of understanding about SEO? Why would you say this material today is important for them?
My goal today is to share a framework for those with a bit more experience in SEO that may be offering this as a service or talking to their customers about SEO as a service. And I want to give you a framework on how to communicate typically during the discovery process with your clients about what is SEO and how does it work.
Awesome. So regardless of your skill level, even if you may not learn any brand new facts today, you'll definitely get some verbiage that you can use maybe to help clarify what can often be a murky world in SEO to your clients. So hopefully everybody will have something to gain today. Again, for those of you just joining us in GoToWebinar, the attendees have clicked up quite a bit since we started even. I want to invite you over to our chat room, which is at ithemes.com/chat. ithemes.com/chat. Even if you don't want to chat and participate in the discussion, oftentimes there's good information that goes past there in the chat. So we invite you to head over there. That's also where we share links that will be of use. So join us there at ithemes.com/chat. That's the best place to ask your questions as we proceed today. We do not use the questions feature in the GoToWebinar control panel. Ask your questions there in the chat room. It's always helpful if you preface your question with the word question in all uppercase. And my job will be to pull those questions out of the chat and have those ready for Lindsay as she wraps up today with a good time of Q&A. Now, one thing I will suggest, if you ask a question, watch the chat room because I may ask you a follow-up to make it a little more clear so that it's more easily answerable for Lindsay as we wrap up. So right there in the chat, ask your questions. We'd love to get those answered for you. We'll have the link to today's slides at the end. So everything you see on the screen will give you a link to download in a PDF after the fact. And we'll also have a link for you as we wrap up with where you can go back and review this webinar as a replay as well. So I think that hits all our housekeeping details. Lindsay, I'm excited about this one. Let's dive into SEO 101.
Thanks again, Nathan. And let's go ahead and dive in with a quick story. And my motivation for starting today's conversation at SEO 101 is to go back to a time a few years ago where I was selling an SEO service to a prospective customer, and I got all the way through the sales process, wrote a proposal, and was kicking off the campaign. I'd already even been paid in part for my services up front, and we were kicking off the campaign, and I realized that the client actually wanted to run Google Ads and pay-per-click advertising, and I had sold them an SEO project. And that we had gotten through multiple conversations without necessarily communicating effectively with each other. And I determined I had to build a better framework for how to organize the beginning, the introduction to search engine optimization for prospective customers of our services. And so that's what I want to share with you today. And if you're a beginner in SEO, this will give you that framework and a great starting point to kick off 2019. If you are more experienced in SEO, you can start to kind of compare and contrast with how you're currently talking to prospects, talking to your customers about SEO, and how you might evolve that in the year to come. A brief agenda. Today we're going to cover the basics. What is search engine optimization? We'll look at how search engines work. We'll explore the anatomy of a search engine results page. We'll talk about the 4 pillars of SEO. We'll talk about why to invest in it, some common approaches, and then we'll end with frequently asked questions. And this agenda is exactly what I follow when I'm presenting this material to prospective search engine optimization customers of ours to make sure that we're really starting with the same foundation before we dive into strategy and tactics that are really specific to that prospect. Search engine optimization is the art and science of getting your website found in the free or organic space of Google, Yahoo, and Bing. The buzzword here is getting found. The phrase that I find people contact us most when they're trying to communicate with us as to what their goals are is they say, I want to get found in Google. The goal of SEO is to increase sales, to generate leads, and to increase website visitors. Another pitch point here to think about is the goal of SEO is going to evolve a bit depending on your audience. I recently was speaking with a group of doctors, and so in that case, it's really important to use language that resonates with them. Instead of increasing sales or generating leads, we're talking about increasing the number of patients they have. So the goal of SEO is growth, and the particular type of growth depends on what industry you are in. How do the search engines work? Understanding this is really fundamental to understanding how to improve your website's visibility in Google, Yahoo, and Bing. In simplistic terms, there's a 3-step process in the search engines. The first thing is that the search engines crawl web pages. They use spiders or bots to do so. Next, they create an index of web pages. You can think of this as an old-fashioned Rolodex. And third, they provide ranked results utilizing an algorithm. The search engine results page is something we're all very familiar with. You enter a search query and you see the results below. Let's look at the anatomy of a Google search results page. And this is a visual tool that I also like to do with prospective customers because oftentimes communicating visually in this space is a great way to elicit where their pain points are. Is it in paid search? Is it in local search? Or is it in SEO? So right below the search query that's performed, you have the ability to filter your results. It defaults to all, and the standard options are maps, shopping, images, news, and more. Depending on your search query, you may see this change up a bit because under the more, there are different sorts and filters that can be appropriate for different types of search queries. Next up, we run into up to 4 paid advertisements that are run via Google Ads. These are going to be in the slightly more competitive keyword spaces. You'll see the full 4-pack deck here. And in the paid advertising place, these businesses are bidding on keywords and drafting concrete ad text, and they're paying on a cost per click basis. So they pay Google anytime someone interacts with their ads, and they can set a price that they're willing to pay for a given term, and they can also set a daily budget to maintain how much they spend on an ongoing basis. And this is run via a live auction every time you do a search query. Another traditional part of the search results is the concept of a snippet. So a snippet has 3 parts. It has a title, which in this case is in purple, a URL, which is in green, and the meta description, which is in black. And this is what you're going to see as a traditional search result where we have about 55 characters to communicate about each of our pages in the title. Our URL is then shown, and our meta description is typically up to 155 characters. The title and the meta description are elements of your page that you have control over, you can define. Whether or not Google uses them depends on how great of a job they think that you've done. So if you do a poor job writing your page titles and meta descriptions, or even leave these blank, in those instances, Google's going to make up a solution for you. Snippets get more exciting, and they can go beyond just having title, URL, and meta description. And when they do so, we start to call this rich snippets. And here you can see 2 examples of rich snippets. One is for a product, where you can see a rating and star reviews. The other is for a cooking recipe, and you can see a lot of additional detail in there, like how many votes it has, how long it's going to take me to prepare, and even the nutritional value of this recipe. Next up are featured snippets. We really love featured snippets at Pathfinder SEO because these create a great opportunity to rise above the paid search results and to get into what we call position 0. It's a free spot in the Google search results. It's often available to search queries that start with a question, although it's not always limited to that. And in this example, you can see I searched for how to set up a tent, and Google is actually answering this for me directly in the search results here. When you think about featured snippets and getting into this space, the other advantage is it positions you well long-term for voice search. We often see that voice search pulls from the featured snippet in a search result and gives you the verbal detail that is included here. Depending on your search query, if you have local intent, you may encounter the local search 3-pack. This is where local businesses are able to really effectively compete with national brands and get free traffic to their website. Local search is managed out of Google My Business or Google Maps, and has kind of its own algorithm that kicks into gear that helps to basically rank the local businesses related to your search query based on a myriad of factors. With the Google search engine results page, one pointer for freelancers is that when you're in that discovery call and you are talking about search engine marketing, to go visual. So to do a screen share and to try to elicit pain. Where is it in the page that business would like to appear? And that visual identification is really great in terms of getting them to know the language of search engine marketing, because that's often where we see people struggle. So SEO can be overwhelming. The primary reasons we find SEO to be overwhelming or hear that others are experiencing those challenges. One is because the algorithms are secret or proprietary. So they feel complicated, and that can be a bit overwhelming. The other big thing is that it's ever evolving. So some people feel like they can't get into SEO because it's always going to change and I'll never be able to keep up. Note that we reference this as ever evolving and not ever changing. And that is because over the 10 years I've done SEO, I actually have seen it to be more of a progressive evolution rather than a drastic change overnight. So if you have a great holistic SEO strategy that you're applying, you're essentially future-proofing your efforts. I don't have to go back into my client's account and redo work that I did last month or even last year. If I'm really being progressive and staying with basically holistic SEO best practices that make real-world marketing sense. The other reason SEO can be overwhelming is because people get buried in endless data and tools. The average person that we speak with in the sales process around SEO, if they're trying a do-it-yourself approach, they're probably using 3 tools or 3 different softwares to collect data about their website. And they're seeing a lot of warnings and red flags, and they're a little bit like a deer frozen in the headlights. They're overwhelmed by data and they're not taking action. This kind of lends ourselves to there's too much information out there about SEO. And that can be a good thing. That's really a great learning tool. There are some amazing blogs online to follow, a lot of great courses. And you just have to be a little bit careful because from time to time you find misinformation. When I think about search engine optimization and I'm trying to go from being overwhelmed to having a really good understanding of the framework and the elements that go into search engine optimization, I break this down into 4 component parts, and we call those component parts the 4 pillars of SEO. I start with pillar number 1, which is technical SEO. It's the first pillar of success because if the search engines are going to show your website in the search results, they first need to be able to find and index it. You can think of 6 different components as to living within technical SEO. These are some files and some different verbiage that you may already be familiar with, and I'll talk about each briefly. The first is your robots.txt file. Essentially, this is a file in your website that's located at your domain /robots.txt. And this is a file that basically says, gives the crawlers and the robot spiders, it gives them a directive as to where they should and they shouldn't go in your website. So you can think of it as giving the search engine crawlers some stops. Hey, don't go here, but yes, you can go over there. And this gives them a roadmap of the type of directions that we recommend that they use to follow to crawl through our website. Alongside of that is an XML sitemap, which is a file that you create in your website and gives a roadmap of where you actually want the search engine crawlers to go and other relevant information. We want to share with the search engines things like when was the page last updated and what its relative priority is to the other pages on our website, so that they have sort of a map of where they're heading when they dive into crawling your website. Another component of technical SEO are meta directives. These are in the header of each page, and they can provide further recommendations on a page-by-page level as to how you want that content to be indexed and how you want that page to be crawled. A phrase you may hear there is something like no follow, and that basically means don't follow the links that come out of this page, or no index. I don't want you to even index this page in the Rolodex. Please move on. Within the framework of technical SEO, we have 3 other really important fields, one of which is site speed. So our website needs to load quickly, and that is because that is paramount to good user experience, and that's one of the things that Google, Yahoo, and Bing really care about. Also in this is mobile usability. With a very high % of people using mobile devices these days, mobile usability is really paramount. And in fact, Google is actually ranking your website or applying how great your mobile website is to understand your entire brand today. So mobile usability is super important. And lastly, security. And you can think of that as making sure that your websites have an SSL certificate installed and are accessible at HTTPS. Our second pillar is content and user experience. Within content and user experience, we think back to the beginning of SEO. Since its inception, you've heard phrases like content is king, and we still believe this. Secondly, usability is super important, and your user experience, which is all about people's behavior on your website and how great they enjoy it. Within the content sphere, when I'm evaluating content, I think about 4 different facets of my content that need to align to really have a great, to check the box and have really solid content on my website. The first is quality. When I talk about quality content, it needs to be unique to that website, needs to be well written at an appropriate grade level. I think they say 9th or 10th grade reading level is generally kind of the search engine's favorite kind of writing level of content. And quality content is sort of the backbone of your website. The next place that we think about content is we start to talk about keywords. What are the words and phrases that we're utilizing within our content that also align with our audience and with search queries? And historically, we always thought about having a singular keyword sort of mapped to a page. And you would even see people doing variations where they'd create one page for Aspen yoga and another one for yoga in Aspen. 2 very similar topics, if not identical. And years ago, you would create a landing page for each one of these different keywords. Well, today when I think about keywords, I'm really grateful to the search engines for having a much better understanding of language and semantics. And what that means is we no longer have to build content out that is SEO only. So something that is purely motivated by the way the search engines work and doesn't make necessarily real world marketing sense. Instead, we can group keywords into keyword clusters and to like-minded keywords. And the search engines can actually extract far more value out of pages that use language that way than they can out of kind of spreading this out. And so an example would be if you wanted to create a page that ranked really well for the word Java, and you just use that phrase over and over and over in your content as your primary keyword, there would be very little context for the search engines to be able to understand what that page is truly about. They would be asking, are we talking about Java in association with coffee? Are we talking about it in association with a place? Maybe we're referencing JavaScript. And so they'd be looking for buzzwords and other phrases that are surrounding this content to extract that meaning. And so if you talked about the phrase, my morning cup of joe, that would be one clue to the search engines that they should really be thinking about this in terms of Java being used in the context of a drink or coffee. The other big piece of content that I think about is recency. So adding new content to your website, expanding on existing content is an SEO 101 strategy. And what this does for the search engines is essentially shows them that you have an active and engaged business, and you're contributing to the community around you by creating really great content. So recency is most frequently applied by having a regularly updated blog, whether it's once a week, once a month, or even daily. But recency can also apply to going back into old content and refreshing it to perform better. And so that's another tactic that falls under this category of recency. I also look at content type. And so you can think of going to a web page that has nothing but text, that's fairly boring, going to a web page that has nothing but imagery. Maybe it's a little more visually stimulating, but I may not be able to derive as much meaning from it as the written word. And then lastly, if I have something that's just video content, I don't have a lot of choice and selection. So there are a lot of different types of content, and the types of pages that resonate really well with the search engines also resonate really well with the users, since Google cares about that user experience. And that's the type of content that has multiple types integrated in a fashion that is really great for user experience. So let's jump over to user experience. You all are great experts in this field. If you're building websites, if you're working in WordPress, you're often focused on user experience, thinking through things like site structure, the look and feel, and the usability. When I think about user experience, I think about trying to put myself in the shoes of a first-time visitor to my website, a prospective buyer of my product, a prospective diner at our restaurant, or whatever the industry space you're in. And when you're thinking about user experience, you put yourself in their shoes. If we're talking about a restaurant, what is this person interested in? They likely want to see my menu and get a sense of the type of offerings and the pricing. They're often looking for hours of operation, maybe contact information, maps, things like that. And then maybe a bit of testimonials and feedback from some of our other diners. And so when I think about user experience, I try to go back to that first-time visitor and really think about what is the usability? How many clicks do they have to take to get to my contact page? Is it really clear what my brand or what my business is all about? Do I have clear terms of service and privacy policies? All of these things under user experience create this seamless experience that the search engines can actually measure and reward you for. Pillar number 3 is on-site optimization. You can think of on-site optimization as the elements in your web pages which help the search engines drive more meaning from the page and its content. I think you'll hear the phrase, since it is built into the phrase SEO, optimization, frequently overused. And in the sales process and in communicating with people that have a very early understanding of search engine optimization, it can be one of these terms that gets over and misapplied and leaves the person on the other end of the conversation sort of feeling like they don't speak the same language as you, and they're not really willing to speak up to say the hard question, what does it mean to optimize my website? And what are you referencing? And so to get really concrete here, we put this pillar together of on-site optimization, the elements that you can do to enhance your content, to enhance your web pages so the search engines can extract even more value from them. The first element are page titles and meta descriptions. And we referenced those in the beginning when we were talking about snippets and the search results. And the page title and meta descriptions on a web page are sort of behind the scenes. They're in the header of each page, And the page title and the page title does appear at the top of your browser bar, but otherwise the meta description is entirely outside of the user experience on your website. But when you think about a web crawler going through your website, they are one of the first things they're going to interact with in the header of the HTML of your page is going to be the page title and the meta description. And that's where we're giving them context. They know the URL that they're looking at, and they know now what the page is about as you describe it via the page title and the meta description. Then they can go in and crawl the rest of the content on that page and continue to derive meaning from it. But this is an often overlooked element of search engine optimization, is really not only getting your page titles and meta descriptions right, but also continuing to evolve them over time to think about things like click-through rates in the search engine results page, how likely someone is to actually click on my content and come to my web page. So a super important part of on-site optimization. Another area are your header tags. So best practices would dictate to have one H1 tag on your page and then have sort of a pyramid flow through H2 through up to H5 or beyond. And within your header tags, you're basically telling the search engines every time they hit one of those, this phrase is really important to me, and here is the structure of my content. If you're thinking about a blog post, you're thinking about your H1 as probably being the title of the blog post. And then as you break up the content in your blog post using H2 and H3 tags, you're nesting information in a way that needs to make logical sense to both readers and the search engines so that they can, again, extract more value from that page content. Next up are alt tags on images. So the search engines rely on the alt tags on images to derive more meaning out of your image content. So for accessibility, alt tags are paramount. They're also important for SEO because they add meaning to your pages by adding more meaning for the search engines to your images. Another really important part of on-site optimization are internal links. So these are links that point from one piece of content on your website to other pieces of content on your website. You can think of these internal links as creating a web. And that web gives the search engines more context. And so you may take an internal link that goes from a really general blog post, say about SEO 101, and then your internal links are pointing to resources where people might go to get much more detailed information about any one piece of information that the search engines are looking for. We call them internal links when they point to other pages on your website, but it is still within best practices and even recommended to also link to off-site resources when somebody else has really valuable content that the search engines and that users would find great meaning from if they were to continue on their journey on that topic. Our last pillar of SEO best practices is off-site SEO. So everything we've talked about so far today have been activities that happen on your website, your technical SEO, your content, and your on-site optimization. What happens off your website is where you build trust and authority. And if we go back to that restaurant example in the very beginning, we could create a website about just about any topic. We could create a website for a fictitious restaurant and do an amazing job with our technical SEO, with our content, with our on-site optimization. And Google isn't going to trust any of this information until they get off-site signals that this restaurant is indeed, say, the best taco location in all of Denver, Colorado. And so we group together off-site SEO under this category of everything that happens off your website to build trust and authority around your brand. Within off-site SEO, I like to break this down into three core areas. The first is link building. Whenever I use this phrase in conversing with prospects or customers, a red flag goes up because most people today know that there are spammy tactics that can be applied to link building that can actually get your website penalized in Google, Yahoo, and Bing. And that those were a lot of the actions that some SEOs were taking in past years, and that Google's really gotten quite a bit stricter about how they look at backlinks into your website. Our experience with offsite SEO is that link building matters, and it matters a lot. If I had to throw out a statistic or a measurement, I'd probably put it in that 30 to 40% of the activity that I apply to my customers' search engine optimization efforts, because it builds trust when it's done really well. And that's the caveat. Link building needs to be done really well. And within the sphere of link building, the way to do it really well is to leverage real-world relationships and get those relationships echoed online. And so when we talk to businesses about link building practices, there are a couple things that I always like to bring up. And this is where I tend to introduce the concept of an 80-20 rule, which is that if you're hiring me to do SEO for your brand, I can do about 80% of the work for you. But I'm going to need somebody on their team, an in-house person, to do 20% of the work in conjunction with me. And the reason is because we need to forge a really strong partnership around the concept of link building to be going after really high-value links that are well within the search engine guidelines. So an example of one of those tactics would be simply being on an industry-related podcast. So one of the things we work with our customers under the sphere of link building is to identify podcasts that are in their industry space where they're going to get some really nice brand building and exposure. And as a secondary and side benefit, usually they're going to pick up a link to their brand from the show notes or the landing page that houses that podcast. And so it's under this umbrella of link building that we can build trust and authority one step at a time through collaboration. Another important part of offsite SEO for many businesses is local search. And we did a webinar a couple weeks just before the holidays about local search, where we talked about a framework of starting in Google My Business and getting your listing really dialed in Google Maps, and then moving into a data distribution network. But really what local search does from a broad context is it puts a pin dropper in the map so that the search engines understand that you have a physical business. And with that pin dropper on the map, you build trust and you build authority around that space. You also create an avenue for others to build trust and authority for you via reviews. So when we see a Google My Business listing in Google Maps and it has 1,000, let's just say 4.7 star reviews, we develop a lot of trust in that brand for the quality of the reviews and the quantity. And in turn, the search engines are looking at that as an offsite signal as well. The last component of offsite SEO is social media. And so we've all thought about social media and SEO in the context of sort of concentric, some overlapping circles. So there's an overlap between the field of SEO and social media, and that comes in the component of offsite SEO. Within social media, it's not as simplistic as links that pass value over. So if I have a great piece of content that gets a lot of social media traffic, that's great. But what matters even more is the strength of my profiles that are then associated with my brand. And so when I'm thinking about social media and working with brands on that little overlapping circle about SEO, the things that matter to me are ongoing engagement, that they're not spread too thin, meaning they're on 10 social platforms and doing a poor job on all of them when they should be on 3 and doing a great job on just 3. And then that the little basics are taken care of. Once in a while, we work with somebody and they didn't put a link from their Facebook business page over to their website, which is how the search engines connect the dots, one of the ways between that social profile and your brand. And so these are the 3 ingredients to having a really strong offsite SEO plan. Why invest in SEO? SEO spending is forecasted to reach $80 billion annually by 2020. It's a pretty staggering figure. And when we talk to people about why invest in SEO, we can start with statistics, things like 93% of online experiences begin with a search engine, or 72% of people that perform a local search actually visited a store within 5 miles. And we can also talk conceptually. What is SEO going to help your business achieve if you invest in it? And the biggest thing that SEO does is it helps prospective customers find your website. This is really foundational, and this is the pain point that most people have when they start to talk about SEO. I can't get found. The other thing that SEO is going to do is create a trust-building network with your customers. And so seeing positive search engine results, whether it's great reviews in Google Maps, or a high listing, or really engaging text in your page titles and meta descriptions, these are all touch points of brand building opportunities. And you can really miss by not being there and lose trust and lose value over time. I would argue that it's cost effective, although I know that some people end up spending a lot on SEO. And likely it's because they decided an approach that wasn't really in line with their business and their values. And then lastly, it has long-lasting impacts on your brand. So when I think about SEO and I position this to customers, I talk about SEO as being similar to training for a marathon. It's going to have essentially two components. First, we really need to get fit and strong in number one. And then we need to kind of continue to maintain that fitness over time. And so, yes, there is value in the long run if you basically go out on a sprint in SEO. If you go and invest in SEO for a couple of months, do a really great job, you're going to see the dividends down the road and in the years to come for that really great effort, just like you would with your health if you got in really, world-class shape for a few months this year. Where its value really picks up is if you maintain that. It doesn't take as much effort as it did right out of the gate to maintain and continue to grow your brand in the search results, but it does take some maintenance and ongoing work. And so that's sort of a framework that we like to use when we're talking about how the search engines work, to give prospective customers a bit of a visual on how we're going to phase our work and why we're going to need to likely invest in SEO in the long run, but that if they don't invest in SEO in the long run, all is not lost if they do kind of a more sprint-oriented project. So let's talk more about the common approaches to search engine optimization. Essentially, when businesses are trying to get found in Google, Yahoo, and Bing, there are three different ways they can approach it. The first is they can hire an agency. It could be an SEO-specific agency, like the one I'm going to partner in, where we focus 110% on search engine marketing. We don't build websites, and we don't do email marketing, and the list goes on of the many things we don't do, but we do focus quite specifically in SEO. Or you could hire a broader digital marketing agency or freelancer who's going to put the SEO campaign alongside other services. And there are pros and cons here to hiring an agency, or essentially you can think of this as outsourcing my SEO. And when you outsource your SEO, one of the big advantages is you're going to get expertise and experience on your side. You're going to have less work in-house. So you've taken something off your plate and added it to somebody else's, which is great. We talk about this 80-20 relationship, and we mentioned that earlier. So when you hire an agency can typically do about 80% of what's going to need to get done to have a great strategy, and only leave about 20% for your team to pick up, and that it should be I should put collaborative in there. And the other pro is you get to rely on outside advice, and partnerships can be really strong with agencies. And so that's a good list of pros. The number one reason we see somebody not hire an agency is just purely cost. SEO takes time, and with no concrete guarantee of results, some people feel like it's a bit of a leap of faith, and they're not willing to take that leap of faith because they feel like the expense is high. A drawback that can be easily overcome, but that is the agency doesn't know your business as well as you do. And so that's something during the discovery process that I think is really important, is to make sure that whoever you're working with as a customer, if you're selling SEO services, really understands that you're going to get to know their brand. You're going to ask pointed questions during that those discovery conversations, to show that it matters to you to know more about their business goals, about their audience, about what they've done in the past for SEO, and that you're not just pitching your process and how you're gonna actually offer the SEO service. And another challenge is sometimes it's hard to find an agency that you can trust. And that's something that we see from time to time, where people feel like they got burned from hiring an agency, and so they turn around and they take a different approach, which is do it yourself. And when we think of people taking that do-it-yourself approach to SEO, the biggest pro is that it's low cost, that you know your business and thus your audience and your goals, and it's really satisfying. It's really satisfying to take a DIY approach to just about anything, to work hard at something and to see the result. On the flip side, do-it-yourself projects can be frustrating. One of the things that we do see people that have gone DIY in SEO is they've spent 80% of their time learning SEO, looking at data, taking courses, and trying to understand this field. They feel like they have to be an expert before they take action, and so they only spend about 20% of their time taking action. And it's in that 20% of the time where they're taking action that they actually garner results. So looking at data and learning is a great use of time, but it's not going to change anything for these DIY folks in terms of building their visibility in Google, Yahoo, and Bing. It's easy to get lost and overwhelmed. It's a big industry space. And sometimes we see people that took a do-it-yourself approach because of the cost, but then over time they signed up for several tools that led up to more costs than they originally forecasted. So they're using a handful of paid SEO softwares. Sometimes those SEO softwares have a lot of overlap, so they're paying for the same thing twice or 3 times. And they come in and they're actually spending a couple $1,000s a year on SEO, sort of unknowingly, thinking that they took the really low-cost solution. As Nathan mentioned in the beginning, at Pathfinder SEO, we have started talking about the concept of guided SEO. So a framework for relying on the expertise and experience of others by basically following a process that's tried and true. And this lends to lower cost than the agency solution, but more active time doing SEO, 80% of your time doing SEO, and only 20% of your time learning or looking at data. And so that's a different framework or a different approach that can be appropriate for some businesses. When we think about guided SEO, we think about it as being a solution for that DIY audience, the business owner who decides, I can't hire an agency, I'm going to do it myself. It's also a solution for freelancers and agencies that are designing and building websites that want to offer SEO as a service to their customers, and that they can build off this guided SEO framework to build out and sell and service a new kind of recurring revenue item for their agency or their freelance business. And another pro is the results are in your hand. So as a guided SEO marketer, essentially you can go as fast or as slow as you want. You can accelerate during low seasons in your business and slow down a touch with your efforts when business is busy. But at the end of the day, the downside is you still have to do the work. And so regardless of what approach a business decides to take to SEO, SEO is like getting fit. It takes effort, it takes time, and that's just sort of one of the accepted practices. There is no magic solution, and there is nothing that people aren't sharing with you that would be the quick trick to essentially get your website found tomorrow. So we'll wrap up here with a handful of frequently asked questions. The first most frequently asked question I get is, when will I see results? So we talked about results aren't guaranteed. We don't tell a client, we're going to get you #1 for a keyword, even if it's in low competition. We like to instead talk about setting goals and key performance indicators, but we don't dictate or draft out what our guaranteed ranking improvements would be. And in the projects we work on, we typically start seeing results anywhere from weeks to months after we start. And so when you're in the weeks category, there are a couple of different things that are going to matter and differentiate between, am I going to see results next week or am I going to see results in 3 months? And there are a couple of questions you have to ask to frame and help to set someone's expectations in alignment with your ability to improve their rankings. One is, where are you starting? And the second is, what is your goal? And so when you think about where you're starting, if we're starting with a brand new brand, they've never had a website, so they have no links pointing to their business, and they're in a competitive industry, and their goal is to rank, for some pretty competitive terms. That's going to be the marathon. So that's going to take a lot of effort and on an ongoing basis to really build that brand's trust and authority and content and all of these other great factors in the search results. On the other hand, when someone asks me, how quickly will I see results, and they're a local business, they've got a great, brand, they have some really engaged customers and people that are brand advocates for them, they're definitely not starting at the same point. If you're thinking about climbing a mountain, they're maybe already starting, halfway to the top of the mountain. And their goal is very reasonable. They're competing in a local space, and it's not too highly competitive, and they really know their audience. And so they're trying to climb a slightly smaller mountain, and they're already starting halfway up. That's where I can start to say, hey, you know what? We're going to really be able to have an impact on your business in a short period of time, and here's why. The other big space that we've talked about is, how competitive is your market? So if you're in a national market and it's quite mature and you're new to the scene, that is going to be a much bigger mountain to climb than if you're in a less competitive space. And that is just by the nature of the search engine algorithms and the concept of ranking content across the web. Another question we see is, what tools do you recommend? One of the tools we highly recommend is starting with a multi-function SEO plugin if you have a WordPress website. And our favorite of these is Yoast. We then layer in terms of other tools, some supplemental plugins that are both going to support Yoast's work and work into some other areas of the search engine algorithms or some of these other pillars of importance. So we're going to want to get Google Analytics on our website. We love like Monsters Insights for making that really easy. We're going to want to think about page speed and performance and look at plugins that might help us improve in that category. If we had an old website and we're moving to a new website, we're likely going to need a way to create 301 redirects quite seamlessly, and we can do that via a plugin. And then lastly, we like to think about structured data, and this is semantic language behind the scenes in the HTML of a page, and this structured data helps the search engines to derive even more meaning from that content. And so there are some supplemental plugins that can help with that. Another big question, what software will I need? So there are a lot of great SEO softwares on the market, and what you're going to need is going to depend a bit on your approach. If you're an agency, DIY, or taking a guided approach. And so if you're working with an agency or considering hiring an agency, it's a really great question is to ask, what software will you be using on my behalf, and how will I be able to collaborate within that? And they'll come back to you and tell you they're using Moz or SEMrush or Ahrefs. There's a lot of great choices out there, and that might be appropriate. For those going DIY, the recommendation in terms of software is to really try to understand where softwares overlap and to look at costs. So do the real math before signing up for multiple softwares that might have some overlapping functionality, and try to figure out, and piece together what the best approach there is. In the DIY space, there are a lot of choices, and some of them are the same as the agency solutions, things like Moz, SEMrush, Ahrefs. If you go guided SEO, then you might want to check out Pathfinder, and basically it is an SEO software that brings together your map, gives you a process, it gives you a coach for monthly one-on-one reviews, and then it gives you tools, things to do keyword research, get monthly reports, and so on. The biggest tip within what software will I need for people is that my favorite SEO data comes from two free sources, Google Analytics and Google Search Console. Whenever I'm doing a project for a customer or working with businesses, regardless, These are 2 free tools, and you can do, 80% of your SEO work with just these 2 core pieces of softwares. Another big one is, how will I stay up to date? So I listed here in the notes a handful of blogs that you might want to check out. And I want to help you rest a little bit assured that the search engines evolve more than they change. And so you want to be investing on ongoing SEO education. You want to be reading in the space, taking courses, things like that, to make sure that you evolve alongside the industry. But you don't need to have that panicky sense that in order to do SEO, I need to be an expert, or I don't want to do SEO because it's just going to change on me. Because what you'll see is that these core elements hold true in the years to come, and that while the search engines do release some big releases from time to time that can really have different impacts on different industries, most people's experience is that this evolution I find it to be fairly gentle and with a lot of warning. Google tells us in advance when something big is coming, like it matters to have a responsive mobile website. We've been hearing them say that for years. And same with, we care about site speed. So this is more of an evolution than any kind of over the night, scary type change. And that is it for today's course material. So thanks so much for being here, and I look forward to diving into your questions.
Awesome. So really good overview of the basics of SEO, and very helpful framework, like you said, to explain these concepts to clients especially. So we do have a few questions that are stacked up. Before we get to those though, there is a special deal here up on the screen. So those of you who are interested in what guided SEO can do for you and your business, there's a special offer for 25% off of 3 months of the Pathfinder service for our iThemes audience. Lindsay, tell us a little bit about what they get with this offer.
Sure. With Pathfinder SEO, we have a solution that is appropriate for site owners, freelancers, and agencies. And so with this offer, essentially, you get a monthly subscription to our platform. And that platform includes all of our process documentation. So we have a checklist and monthly assignments that help people go through the most impactful SEO tactics that fit into each of those 4 pillars. Basically, you can think of it as like we give you the map. Do this, then do this, and then finally go here. We give people the tool set, so keyword research, rank tracking, monthly reports to monitor their progress and really get to know their audience. And then the reason we call it guided is because we come alongside your efforts, and we have a monthly one-on-one hour-long review with your dedicated SEO coach. And in that review, we can go over your results, answer questions, and essentially, be along on your journey. We say it's for freelancers and agencies as well, because we have a lot of freelancers and agencies who use Pathfinder SEO to build out this SEO service item within their own businesses. So they're actually offering SEO services to their clients and using Pathfinder as their partner.
Excellent. So excellent offer here, 25% off of those 3 months. That's at pathfinderseo.com/iThemes. Now, we do want to mention one other event that's coming up on iThemes training. We will be having our next SEO boot camp, February the 11th through the 13th. And Lindsay will be hosting that with us. So 3 full days of SEO training, followed by the next week, SEO business training. So Lindsay, tell us a little bit, first of all, about the SEO bootcamp and what we're going to cover during those 3 days.
In those 3 days, Nathan, we're going to talk about the how and the what and the why behind basically each of these 4 pillars. So we're going to break these different pillars of SEO that we talked about down today into actionable demonstrations, essentially, of, okay, we're talking about our XML sitemap. How do we actually configure that? And so we'll be looking at a lot of websites and examples and getting our hands into the meat of SEO.
Excellent. And then the SEO business training, which will be the following week. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's going to be all about how to price and sell SEO as a service. So for freelancers and agencies looking to grow this area of their businesses, we're going to share essentially our experience having been in the SEO industry and the agency side for about 10 years about how we price and how we sell these services.
Awesome. So whatever side of the SEO equation you fall on, whether you're a DIYer or whether you are a person who's working with clients to do SEO, both of these can be very helpful to you. If you're DIYing, you'll learn how to do SEO on your own site in the boot camp. And if you'd like to sell SEO services, Lindsay's going to teach you how to do that on the 19th. Now, somebody's already asking there for a link to the boot camp. The sales page is not up yet. We should have that up, I believe, next week at some point. But what we'll have is an email that goes out to everybody with these links. If you are not currently receiving iThemes training emails, you can sign up for those by going to our website, training.ithemes.com, and clicking the free upcoming webinars link. And there you'll see a big green button at the top that says to sign up for schedule updates. Likely, though, you're on our email list if you're here at this webinar, because that's where most of you find the webinars. So you'll be hearing about this in the next week or so. We'll have the sales page up so you guys can register for these events. We do have a number of questions that have come in, and let's start to deal with some of those. First of all, Lindsay, in the examples early on, I saw that you had a Google search for Phoenix hotels, and I think I know why that is. You're going to be in Phoenix speaking pretty soon, right?
I am. So I was multitasking, putting slides together and figuring out logistics.
Absolutely. Lindsay and I will both be speaking at WordCamp Phoenix next month. That's February 15th through 17th. So if you're in that area, we'd love to meet you in person, and that's just a great event. If you're anywhere around Phoenix, WordCamp Phoenix is coming up. Okay, voice search was something that was talked about earlier on in the chat room and in your presentation. Voice search, I mean, obviously, it works for Google devices like Google Home, and Google's going to pull from its own index. But what about other things like Apple Siri or Amazon Alexa or Microsoft Cortana? How do they get results, and how can we optimize for those devices?
So this is similar to the question, how do I optimize for Yahoo, or how do I optimize for Bing? And thinking about voice search in such segmented audiences and breaking it out, and thinking about devices being utilized, I think is a little bit too narrow of an approach to think about voice search. So when I think about voice search, I think of it very holistically as how am I going to get my website content out on the web? And it could go beyond my website because, but other entities can also crawl your web content. But for the most part, what I really think about right now when I'm helping position customers for voice search is how they write content. And the big tip under voice search and how to get into it is first think about how to get into that featured snippet result. So that position 0 result. A lot of voice search are questions, can I substitute olive oil for, canola oil in this recipe or something like that. So I'm doing something in the kitchen. I turn to voice search to answer a question, and the type of content that's going to appear there succinctly answers that question. And so that's where we really talk to our customers is first identifying in the voice search space what types of searches people are going to be doing in your industry space, so you're reaching the right audience. Then how am I going to create that content? It's going to, voice search usually pulls from the written word, so it's going to need to be in writing. And then we get that content out onto their website. We're building trust around their website. We might syndicate that content out. You can try to get into some trusted resources like Wikipedia to build trust as well around different concepts. But at the end of the day, getting into voice search, regardless of the tool, is all about getting the answers to the questions into your website in a really user-friendly manner.
Yeah, absolutely. Great answer. You mentioned a phrase there in that answer, and it was the next question that I had on my list here that JJ asked earlier, which was, you mentioned this holistic approach to SEO. Could you maybe just give a little more clarity on what you mean by that term?
When I think about holistic SEO, I think about a strategy that works today that's also going to work for me tomorrow. So with holistic SEO, I'm thinking about real-world marketing tactics that I can talk to a business owner with, and they're going to understand how it fits into the broader context of their marketing initiatives. And so we used to see people in the SEO space doing a lot of SEO work, and it was like a siloed chamber. You could do SEO in like a back closet of an organization, have very little overlap with anybody else. And when you had to talk about it with somebody, you had to say, I got all these links for you on these article submissions websites, but don't go look at them. They don't look great. And things like that. When I think about a holistic SEO, I'm thinking about strategies that I'm really proud to take to the top of an organization, that they are not going to need me to explain the why behind it. They're going to say, wow, holistic SEO, you helped us get a bunch of great reviews in Google Maps. That makes total sense to me as to why that's going to overlap with the search engine algorithms.
Gotcha. There was a question in the chat about the slide link working. If somebody could verify that that is working, seems like somebody couldn't access it, but it should be working. It's working for me. If somebody else could test that and just let us know in the chat that it is working, that would be helpful. In the meantime, a couple of questions came in from folks with questions about the Pathfinder service. Sherry was wondering if Pathfinder would be a good tool for her as she's making an initial evaluation of a site to make a proposal from.
So if you're making an initial evaluation of the site, Pathfinder doesn't have like scanning tools and things like that are going to come back to you and say, this site isn't user friendly or whatever, mobile friendly and things like that. So it's not a website scanning tool. Where Pathfinder can come into play is we do have an SEO scoring rubric. And so you can submit a website to us and our team will score and get back to you. And they're going to let you know where your website basically stands today and what the biggest areas of opportunity are. And so if you're in that sales process and you're working with a prospect, feel free to shoot over that website to us and we'll give you back the pitch that you can include as to what's missing or what's not working within their SEO today to help you close that deal and bring to light maybe some things that they're not thinking about in terms of what might be wrong with their existing website.
Perfect. Lindsay, are you okay to stay for maybe 5 more minutes to catch the rest of these questions?
I am.
Great. Greg wanted to know, he's still building a website. Can he sign up now for the Pathfinder discount and then use it in a month or two when his site is complete?
That's a great question. As soon as you sign up, essentially it's a monthly service, so you're instantly signed up to the platform. You can't really delay that component of it. But what I would say to you is you would fall, if you do sign up in advance of a site going live, you fall into like 10% of our customer base that we think are really doing it right. So everybody's doing it right by getting involved in SEO, but those that start early are thinking about the building blocks of SEO before their site goes live. And it's sort of like building a house. If you put the wiring in before you put the roof on and you're all done, it's going to be a little bit more cost effective and probably better than if you circle back around later and decide that you want an outlet added, to the wall behind your kitchen.
Absolutely. So we had a question come in from Cam in Georgia a little bit earlier, and this is actually a subject that you covered in great detail in the previous webinar on local search back in December. And by the way, I did drop a link to that webinar in the chat room earlier, so if you want to go back and review it, folks, you can. Cam's question was, if we have a home business, which a lot of our audience, they're freelancers working from home, how would you recommend handling local search when we don't want to give out an actual physical address?
That's a great question. And Google does allow you to put out a service area essentially around your location. And that service area can be very specific, down to a zip code, to a bit broader, a whole city. You can even set a service area to an entire country. But it isn't quite as effective as when you are willing to reveal your address. Because you can think that there is a bit of trust that gets developed by really knowing and being public about where that pin dropper is on the map. And so we work with this with freelancers, photographers. There are quite a few businesses that have this same dilemma. And ultimately, privacy, I think, trumps search engine results for sure, and that peace of mind. But you definitely want to think critically about it. And if you go with option B and you just go with a service area, know that it's not quite as strong as if you're willing to disclose that information in the algorithms. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't be in Google Maps. You certainly should. Still get your listing out there, still work on reviews. There are a lot of things that you can be doing. And my last little point there too is see what others are doing in your space. Because if everybody's giving their address, if you're a photographer and everybody in your geographic area is giving their address, many a times a home address, and you're the only one who isn't, then you're a little bit more behind the curve. Then if everybody else is following that same thing, then it's a much more level playing field.
That's a great answer. We had a few questions come in about alternatives to Yoast. Any opinions on SEO Press or all-in-one SEO versus Yoast?
You know, I used all-in-one SEO for quite a few years. I haven't used the other plugin you mentioned, the SEO Press or SEO Presser. And I know that there are some really great, what we consider these sort of like ecosystem, very holistic SEO plugins out on the market. And so at the end of the day, it's more about how you configure the plugin than the actual plugin. So if you're really well versed in any given plugin and you feel like you've then been able to bring in some supplemental plugins to maybe fill in some gaps where Yoast would have taken care of something for you, that this other plugin is not, if you're really in that good space, then there's no reason to change it. But if you are getting an SEO for the first time, or if you feel like, hey, I don't really know any of these SEO plugins all that well right out of the gate, then we find the team over at Yoast to be doing an exceptional job in the plugin space. And the reason is because they're SEOs at the beginning and then plugin developers and teachers now. And so they really know the field of SEO. And they are at the forefront of it and are certainly leaders in the space.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see here. Ben has a question. Ben is from Sweden, and he is wondering, at Pathfinder, can you handle sites in languages other than English?
That's a great question. All of our materials, meaning the checklist and everything that we give you in terms of how to do SEO, it's all in English. But in terms of the monthly reporting, the keyword research, the keyword rankings, that can be done from anywhere. And so within the tools, you can basically set your geographic area. It defaults to the United States just simply because that's where we are, and most of our customers are in the US. But we work with folks all over the world, and they basically just tell us, and every time they add a keyword, they say, I care about how this keyword ranks or how this keyword performs in this geographic area.
Gotcha. So if the site itself is in another language besides English, could you help?
Yeah, so we could help because if you know that language, you can bridge the gap. So if you know English and say the site's in German, and you can read the English, tutorials and stuff on our website, and then apply it, and do your keyword research in German, that's no problem at all. But our team is mostly just English speaking in terms of our training sessions and things like that.
Gotcha. Okay, one last question, and thanks again for hanging out for a few more minutes here to catch all of these. Greg would like to know, is using social media a must? What if a customer does not want to use social media? Is it still possible to get good rankings without social media?
Yes, in most industry spaces, it is possible. So that's, again, kind of like that earlier question, maybe take a look at what others are doing in your space. And I often think about, and if everybody in your competitive space is highly engaged in social media, then it's a little bit more of a mark against you if you're not there in terms of a brand or a business in SEO. But if other people are there but not doing the greatest job, then it's probably not a big deal for your brand, and you can overcome a lot with really great link building. And so that's one way to sort of evaluate that space and how important it is. But we work with a lot of businesses that do great in organic search and don't have a social channel live. Awesome.
That's good to know. All right. So First Class had a question about keyword determination. I think we're over time today, so we're not going to get into that question because in a couple of weeks, Lindsay is going to have a webinar back with us here on iThemes Training, January 22nd. So that is a Tuesday. It's a week. Well, let's see. Tuesday, a week from now. I think it's January 22nd. You do the math. And she's going to be talking all about keyword research. Lindsay, you want to talk to us about what's going to happen in that webinar?
Yeah, in that webinar, we're going to talk about keyword research and some basic fundamentals, but we're also going to take a look at a slightly different approach that we call qualitative keyword research. So when I do keyword research for a business, a lot of the work I do is actually has no numbers involved. So I'm not necessarily always trying to estimate volume and estimate competition to get into the right keyword space. That's a part of the puzzle, but it's not all of the puzzle. And so we'll unpack that further in that webinar.
Awesome. It's going to be a great one. And just to remind you one last time, 25% off for 3 months at pathfinderseo.com/ithemes. If you can benefit from the guided SEO services that Lindsay is offering, I think it's a wonderful opportunity, whether you're a DIYer or whether you are working with clients, to have an SEO expert walk alongside you through that process. So it's a wonderful approach to SEO. Learn more there at pathfinderseo.com. Lindsay, thanks again so much for being with us. Thanks for hanging out again a few extra minutes to catch all these questions. A lot of great interest here in the chat room today. Any last words as we're signing off?
The biggest thing in SEO is to take action. And so whether you're doing SEO for yourself or your customers, start thinking about what actionable tactics you can deploy to hit some of those different of those 4 pillars and really dive in.
Awesome. And folks, mark these dates on your calendars, February 11th through 13th and February the 19th for our SEO Bootcamp and SEO Business Training. You will be hearing more about that from us by email. So that'll be going out here in the next several days. Thanks again for hanging out with us, folks, for the last hour. Hopefully it's been a great investment of your time. I've learned some things. Hopefully you have too. We'll see you next time here on iThemes Training, where we go further together.